Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. It is the 20th of August in the year 2021. Wow, how does time fly? 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on a Friday evening, live here on the Awaken the World group page, removing negative thought. uh, like the idea that you're somehow doomed. So, as always, let me express my love for each and every single one of you. It's an amazing, an amazing time to be alive right now. It really, really is when you think about it. It's certainly not a boring time, that's for sure. And excuse me, you can see I'm wearing my sluffy old kayak shirt. I haven't really taken it off. Uh, we got out kayaking today. It was just sublime. It was just beautiful, and there was no smoke, and the sun wasn't too hot, and there was a nice breeze, and the water was refreshing. I went for a swim as well, and yeah, it was just a beautiful day. We got to take Dallas out with us, one of our group members, and it is that time in nature, that time when we can reconnect again, to get out of the mess and the hustle and bustle and all the confusion that's going on around us. That is so very important. It really, really is. And you know what? I'm going to get up nice and early tomorrow morning and head out the door and do it all over again. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about getting rid of negative thought. And in some ways, this is a little bit of a misnomer, and just before I do that, I want to remind each of you how loved you are. That no matter what you may think is happening in this physical universe, you are incredibly, deeply, wholly, completely loved. As a matter of fact, you are love. You are part of that divine being. There is no harm that truly comes to you. And it's part of that whole you structure that we're going to be talking about this evening when it comes to this idea about negative thought. So, if you've ever listened to Sadhguru, he had said some time ago a very interesting little statement, and it's perfectly true. And we're going to talk about why. And what he said is that the only thing the mind knows how to do is add and multiply. That's it. It doesn't really know how to do anything else. Excuse me for 1 second. So what does this really, really mean? Well, it means that if we have a thought in our head that we don't like, and we decide with ourselves that we're not going to repeat that thought again, that we're not going to have that thought again, what happens? You can't take that thought out. What happens is another thought is added to it. And if you really, really, really try really hard to get rid of that negative thought, that thought multiplies. And now you're having a whole bunch of thoughts about that negative thought, which are predominantly negative, about the fact that you can't seem to remove the negative thought that you wanted to remove in the first place. Almost like cockroaches. They just keep multiplying. So how are we going to get rid of negative thought? Well, there's really a couple things that we can do with this. And it's not that we're really getting rid of. We're simply going to refocus. And this is the exact same thing that I'm talking about when I say, if you have a thought that is causing an alarm bell within your intelligent body field and sending back a vibration that's causing you to realize you feel like crap or depressed or angry or sad or whatever the case may be, you have to be willing to recognize what you were thinking. Now, how do all these negative thoughts come up? Well, when we really pay attention, the negative thoughts are always a response to what we think is outside stimuli, our environment. Someone says something to us. We notice that the whole neighborhood is in flames. Garhen keeps saying the word doom. I noticed that I got to watch how I get in the light here because there's a fair amount of light outside. So maybe if I move myself over into the corner here, I'll be a little more apparent instead of just a big dark blob. Although maybe a big dark blob is better. So we can't force the concept of removing a negative thought from our mind. We can't force ourselves into it. And the reason being is that's what our mind is. Our mind is a artificially aware, intelligent recorder. It's a big storage bank, a hard drive. And it is taking in all of it, and it is laying within itself an energetic record. And it is that record that travels back with you, if you will, if we need to use that sort of language. And in this case, I only mean it illustratively. When you go to the other side or travel back to that place beyond the physical realm, you carry this hard drive with you. And that hard drive goes into that data bank of creation, the supercomputer, that consciousness, that one consciousness we would call the Creator or God. Now, you may think it's a little bit heretical to say, the supercomputer, but really, it doesn't really matter what the word is we're just trying to illustrate things, and we get so hung up on the labels, and we really got to stay away from the labels. So, in order to really get away from negative thinking, because no matter what you do, you will be besieged by negative thinking at some time or another. And it doesn't happen consciously. A lot of times, it's a direct response to something that is recognized way from the distant past. You may not even be cognitively aware of where the negative thought is actually originating from. But it'll happen, and you don't have control over it. Now, this is another thing that we've talked about before, is the concept of what you really are. And realistically, the mind-body interface can both be thought of as part of the vehicle. Both the physiological or physical aspect and the psychological or less obvious aspect of your being, the sense of an egoic self. Now, what you truly are, is simply manifesting that vehicle. And just like your car, you're the one who's supposed to be in control of your vehicle. I mean, I really, really hope so. We haven't gone to fully automated vehicles to any huge degree yet, and I would still want to have control over the vehicle. Most of us, most people, don't have control over the vehicle that they've manifested here on the planet. They're not really those people, of course, but we're just going to use that for sake of being able to communicate. So what we need to do is we need to create that space that I've talked about before. And a lot of people get the idea that this space somehow makes you cold and unresponsive, or takes away your humanity in some way. And as a matter of fact, the exact opposite is true. You see, the one thing about that artificial intelligent computer that you think is you, that goes by the name Garhen or Kelly or whatever, Dallas or whoever that name may be, the one thing about that computer is that It's always looking to validate in any given moment validate the validity of its existence, that it is the thing. And you are something beyond that. And realistically, you are life itself. You are the aliveness that you can feel. So, when you close your eyes, you 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 don't lose yourself. You don't think all of a sudden, well, I'm not there. If you close your eyes and you calm yourself even just for a moment, you'll feel the aliveness of your being. And in reality, the aliveness of your being is that which you are. The experience you're having of the aliveness of your being is part of that spiritual experience and part of our journey here to reconnect fully with that aliveness. But you don't need to reconnect with it. You are that aliveness of being. And you can remind yourself of what you truly are in any moment by just stopping and getting back in contact with that aliveness and recognize that that is what you are. You are that aliveness. You are that consciousness of creation. And you believe yourself to be segmented in some way into various parts. And in one way you are, and in another way you're not. Because it's all part of that same thing. All part of that same whole, all part of that same one. But when we get back in touch with our aliveness, when we recognize our aliveness and we can become grounded and centered in our aliveness, we begin to create that space. The space of the watcher. The space that does not react to what's happening within the mind. That is able to deal with effectively what may be happening in the body in terms of suffering, let's say. This sense of aliveness helps create a distance where you realize that what you are is that witnessing presence that you can always feel. And when you fully accept that in your being, there is a gap created where you become aware of the machinations of the mind and the communications of the body, but you are no longer reacting to them from that unconscious state. You are instead observing them from that place of aliveness, that place of the watcher. And in that you see how those thoughts arise quite of their own volition and fall away of their own volition. So this is a step beyond. One of the things that I've done over the years now is try to give, steps. Let's call them a whole bunch of different paths. So if you're having a hard time scrambling up this path, well, there's also this path over here. And if you're not really getting too far with this path, well, there's another path over this way. And that's what I'm really doing here is advancing you along, or offering you the opportunity to advance along various pathways in the way you're addressing the world and your awakening consciousness. So, you've heard me talk before, and it's a perfectly valid practice about reminding yourself. Because you can't actually take the thought and throw it away. Trying to do that will end up adding to it. And this is a good time to talk about the really negative thoughts. Not thoughts about how miserable climate change is or how terrible it is that wildfires are going on, but the really, 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 really miserable thoughts. The thoughts of anger, huge amounts of anger and rage. The thoughts that we direct against others, wanting revenge, wanting to get back, wanting to settle the score. How dare you? Those thoughts, those type of thoughts. Every single master in the world has reminded us in one way or another. Harboring those sort of thoughts within your being towards another or a situation in your existence is much like trying to poison that person by drinking the poison yourself. And as a matter of fact, that's exactly what's happening. Is you are literally poisoning your being with those thoughts. And you say, Garhen, well, wait a minute. You just told me I can't take those thoughts away. Those thoughts are there poisoning me. And I didn't want them, but there they are. I know. It really, really, really sucks. But it is your perceptions, your little tiny narrow viewpoint of yourself, and somehow your lack of power, lack of ability, lack of beingness, lack of worthiness of being loved, that is tapping you in to that part of that egoic cloud of humanity. You've set yourself up as a receiver of that. And to do that, it means you're transmitting that. And when you start transmitting that and you're receiving that, you get caught in these fatal loops where negative thought begets negative thought. And no matter how hard you try, you can't find a way out. At that point, you've gone too far with the usual techniques to catch yourself. This is a deeper sort of answer. And one of the best ways to approach this answer is through taking just a few minutes and meditating. Use that Isha Kriya, use one of my meditations, whatever suits you, just a few minutes even, to reground yourself, to feel that aliveness of your being again. And in the moment that you feel that aliveness, that space appears, and you can witness these thoughts arising and no longer be willing to place any judgment on them. So, I face a lot of this, especially these days with the climate change, because, I'll do a video on climate change and post it somewhere, and sometimes they're not on Facebook. And you'll get a lot of people saying, well, why do you have to be so negative? And in fact, I'm not negative about it at all. But if my inner perception, if my inner state of being was not in the right place, I could certainly see how negativity would appear to be. But that negativity is being created by that person's mind, not by my mind. Because I'm not negative. I have no thought on it whatsoever. But I will directly observe and report what I see. And I do so from a place of having no care whatsoever what humanity decides to do. Do I find it frustrating? Absolutely. Would I prefer to see humanity go down the best possible scenario with this? Hands on deck. I'd be happy, joy. I'd be doing the happy dance to see humanity wake up and turn this into what it is being offered to us. And that is a monumentous opportunity. If I'm feeling anything at all, I'm feeling a little bit of excitement at the possibility that despite my own better judgment, we may get this time. And that's a grand concept. It is not something that would cause a generation of negative thoughts. But when we become wrapped up in these negative thoughts, when we can no longer muster our sense of self and return ourselves to that place of peace, we must return to our true inner being. And the way to do that is to just stop and feel yourself there. And it gets a little confusing. What's really feeling what? Is there a who feeling a who? And the answer is no. There's just a tension being taken off the illusion long enough, and you are the illusion. In order to feel yourself, which is not the illusion. Suck on that one for a little bit. And this is why every person who speaks on spiritual matters really has to think about and struggle a lot with language, because we're really talking about an absolute level of being and a physical level of being, a level of relativity, a level of contrast, right? Hot and cold, up and down. And then, of course, we create all the in-betweens, including things and concepts like good or bad, concepts like an old guy in a chair, whatever the case may be. It is your perceptions, and most of those have been so deeply ingrained, so deeply trained in, as I've often said to people, if you've spent 40 years dead asleep, why are you beating yourself up if 5 years later you're still not really awake yet? Because that which is pushing people into slumber begins at birth and surrounds us all throughout every aspect of our lives. That is another joyous opportunity that we're being offered right now. This earth shaking, this, and what I'm really talking about is, to us, the earth is shaking. The whole pandemic, what's happening with global climate change, and the scary parts that are yet to come. And I just want to put a plea out there right now to every single person who can. Get yourself a little hive. If you live in town, get a mason bee hive. It can literally go on your porch in the shade somewhere. As it turns out, the vast majority of bees only function well between 12 and 27 degrees Celsius. Now, on one hand, with our northern areas warming, that may give a little more room for bees. But unfortunately, the vast swaths of land that bees will no longer be able to operate competently in may literally push those species completely over the edge. We are facing dire times. But do you see the little tiny hint of a smile on my face? In reality, you've never been safe here anyways. And the reason we tend to judge things as negative is we're always holding it up in light of what we think should be. Whether it's our being alive, or our feeling like we're secure in some way when there truly is no security here, no matter what it is. The reason why we're feeling negative is we're resisting it. We're pushing up against what is right in front of us. And as I've said many, many, many times, it's never about what's right in front of you. It's about what you're going to choose in light of what you're being shown. And in order to do that effectively, in order to make those choices effectively, as I say to Kelly on a regular basis, because she loves to personalize those things and make them all about her, it's all about you but it's not about you. So whatever decision that you're going to make, be willing to take your own ego out of it. Whatever choice you're going to make in your existence, allow yourself that space to step back, feel your aliveness, and you will know in that moment what you need to do. The real trick is whether egoically you're willing to accept what you need to do and then do it. Now, right now, that's at a micro level. That's what I'm talking about right now, is the level of you, one ego. But right now, because the micro is always reflective of the macro, the larger is reflected in the small, and the small in the large. At a planetary level, our civilization is in exactly the same boat. We can kick and we can cry and we can scream and we can generate all sorts of negative thoughts, or we can all set back. We can all feel that inner space of our being and look around and realize that we're all one. And that the way out of this is to act as one, to become one. One doesn't war with itself. Although we're pretty adept at doing it within our own beings, and that's why we have war writ large. That's why war is reflected planetarily. That planetary war, the war that happens around the globe, isn't linked to whatever the hell you think is happening physically. It's linked to that single solitary egoic receiver that is at war with itself. And so many of us are at war with ourselves. One of the biggest reasons that we go to war with ourselves has nothing to do with the negativity that I'm talking about, although it's quite capable of generating a lot of that negativity. And that has to do with you not being true to that inner state of connection and aliveness and stillness that is you. You know, I had Dallas, our group member, today, because I was regurgitating some stuff for him that he needed to know, not food. And we were talking about how this information comes to me. And I said, the deal is that when you get to that place of aliveness, what you truly are, everything that you ever need, every answer you ever have to any question is already there. And when people say, well, how do you know? I always say the same thing. And it's true, I have. I've read tens of thousands of books. I have an eidetic memory. Virtually anything that I read, see, or hear is permanent. But that doesn't cover everything I know. You already have the entire wisdom of creation within you. That is what you are. That aliveness of being that knows all, sees all, and hears all. And in the moment that you're back in contact with that space is created, and the thoughts that arise are no longer negative or positive. They simply are thoughts arising. And you know that you need pay them no heed. They're simply part of the dysfunction of the egoic memory bank of your supposed being that is functioning just as that, a recorder of your life experience. It's energetically taking every thought, word, and deed, everything you've seen, heard, experienced, all the stuff you've ever forgotten that's happened to you is all in that memory bank. And that memory bank, when it runs rampant, creates all sorts of dysfunction in our lives. But we're the dysfunction. Once you accept it's a memory bank, once you accept that which arises out of that memory bank's mind is a function of programming, environment, what it's absorbed or what it's been put into it, you stand separate from it, but not separate from it. And in contacting that space, the machinations and the rising and falling of thoughts are no longer negative. They're simply waves on a pond. And as any good surfer, you learn to pick which waves that you're going to entrain with. You notice what's rising and falling in your mind, and something rises that you feel would be beneficial. So you allow yourself to create more thoughts that rise in that direction. But the moment you begin to feel that you've switched into negative territory, you simply pull yourself back from the whole thing and get back in touch with that aliveness again. So before I leave this evening, I just want to do that with you just once. It may feel like you, as an egoic physical being and a mind, are getting in touch with something within you. But I need you to know right now that it's quite the opposite. What's happening is the attention is pointing back towards the core again. And you are actually in this moment going to feel your true self, the aliveness that you are, the all-knowing, all-seeing, eternal being that is really you. And it's this simple. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath and relax. Don't try and stop any thought that comes up. Don't pay them any attention. Just feel what's there in the stillness. It's almost like a humming, a deep background hum of life itself. Quick, what's wrong right now in this moment? Well, of course, the answer is nothing. If you do that, even for a second, there's nothing wrong, just like that. Why? Because you've returned to what you really are. Now, one of the big issues is you didn't come here to sit and not ride the roller coaster. So this isn't a state of being that you're trying to get to and stay in all the time. That's not the point. This is your anchor. This is the core of what you are. This is just a reminder that, hey, this is what I am. And then go ahead and dive into that experience. Go ahead and laugh and cry and shout and wail and grind your teeth and wrench your hair. And then laugh at what you do and return to that center of being again. What's wrong right now? Nothing. That's it. That's all. That's all I have tonight. Removing negative thought isn't really about changing your thoughts. I mean, you can replace thoughts, but when you get way too far gone, you just have to return to your own source. That which you truly are. That place where there is nothing wrong ever, where there is actually no time, no past, no future, just this ever-present moment and that feeling of life itself. You are so loved. It's totally true. Namaste. Have a beautiful Friday night. Please get outside this weekend in any way you can. Get your feet into the grass. Take a load off your mind. Don't worry. Don't struggle. And get back in touch with the being that you are at the core. You are beautiful. Good night.